Somewhere inside the roaring chaos of professional tennis, while cameras stayed locked on the biggest names in the sport and headlines continued revolving around champions who had already built their legacies, another story was quietly beginning to force its way into the spotlight. Not with loud predictions. Not with marketing campaigns. Not with endless hype. But with victories. Real victories. The kind that force the entire sport to stop pretending they are accidental. And by the summer of 2026, that story finally exploded into something impossible to ignore. Because somewhere on the grass courts of Berlin, a 21-year-old Filipina named Alex Eala stopped looking like a promising young talent and started looking like a genuine threat to the biggest names in women's tennis. The transformation did not happen overnight. It did not begin with one lucky draw or one emotional upset. It was built slowly, painfully, through years of pressure, expectations, losses, long flights, lonely training sessions, and the burden of carrying an entire nation's hopes on her shoulders long before she was old enough to fully understand what that responsibility meant. But in Berlin, something changed. Not just for Alex Eala. For the entire tour. For years, the conversation surrounding Eala had always sounded similar. Talented. Dangerous. Promising. One for the future. A player with potential. A player who might someday challenge the elite if everything developed correctly. Potential. In tennis, that word can become dangerous. Because some players spend their entire careers trapped inside it. The sport is filled with former junior champions who were once described as future superstars but never truly crossed the gap between promise and permanence. The difference between juniors and the professional tour is brutal. Talent alone means nothing once every opponent can serve at 180 km per hour and punish even the smallest hesitation. Alex Eala knew that better than anyone. She had already experienced flashes of greatness before Berlin. Most notably at the Miami Open in 2025, where she stunned the tennis world with an unforgettable run that included massive victories against elite opponents. For a few incredible days, she looked unstoppable. But inside the WTA locker room, there were still doubts. Was Miami real? Or was it simply one magical tournament where everything aligned perfectly? Fast hard courts. Perfect conditions. Momentum. Confidence. A crowd energized by Filipino fans who transformed parts of the stadium into something resembling home support. The tennis world had seen these kinds of runs before. Young players catching fire for one tournament only to disappear back into inconsistency once the magic faded. And because of that, many people inside the sport quietly categorized Miami as an outlier. A breakthrough. But not yet proof. Berlin changed that forever. The timing could not have been more dramatic. The grass court season always creates uncertainty in tennis. The surface is faster. The points are shorter. The margins become thinner. Players who dominate on clay suddenly look vulnerable. Big servers become more dangerous. Confidence becomes even more important. And Alex Eala entered Berlin carrying enormous pressure. She was still outside the world's top 30. Still unseeded. Still trying to convince people that her rise was sustainable. Most analysts expected her to compete hard, maybe win a round or two, and continue building experience before Wimbledon. Nobody expected what happened next. Her first huge statement came against Elena Rybakina. That name alone tells you how difficult the challenge was. Rybakina was not simply another top player. She was a Wimbledon champion. One of the cleanest ball strikers in the entire sport. A player whose serve on grass becomes almost impossible to neutralize once she finds rhythm. On paper, this was a nightmare matchup for Eala. But the moment the match began, something felt different. Eala did not play scared. She did not look intimidated. She moved with freedom. Every rally felt intentional. Every return looked aggressive. Instead of reacting to Rybakina's power, she absorbed it and redirected it with remarkable calmness. The deeper the match went, the more visible the frustration became on Rybakina's side of the net. Because Alex Eala was refusing to give her the quick points she desperately wanted. And when the final point ended, the scoreboard showed something almost nobody predicted. Alex Eala had defeated Elena Rybakina in straight sets. On grass. At a WTA 500 event. against one of the most dangerous grass court players alive. The victory immediately sent shockwaves through tennis. But what happened next mattered even more. Because one upset can happen. One magical performance can happen. Sustaining that level is what separates contenders from champions. And less than 48 hours later, Eala stepped back onto the court to face another giant challenge. Elina Svitolina. Former world number 3. 20 career titles. A player respected across the entire sport for her intelligence, movement, discipline, and experience under pressure. This was supposed to be the moment where reality returned. Instead, it became another masterpiece. The image from that match still feels cinematic. Court 1 at Steffi Graf Stadion. The atmosphere tense. The rallies fast and physical. And standing across from Svitolina was a young Filipina who looked increasingly comfortable competing with the best players on earth. The scoreboard eventually read 6-3, 6-4. Straight sets again. Another top 10 victory. Another reminder that this was no longer accidental. When the match ended, Eala stood near the baseline with tears in her eyes. Her racket hung loosely in her left hand as if she had forgotten she was still holding it. Her right hand covered her mouth. Shock, relief, disbelief, all colliding at once. Across the net, Svitolina walked forward to shake her hand while the crowd applauded one of the biggest performances of Eala's career. And somewhere inside that moment, the entire trajectory of her career changed. Because victories like this alter perception permanently. Not just among fans. Inside locker rooms. Inside coaching staffs. Inside the minds of future opponents. Suddenly, Alex Eala was no longer someone top players expected to beat. She became someone they had to prepare for carefully. That shift matters enormously in professional tennis. The numbers behind the victory only made the performance more impressive. Svitolina hit more aces. Svitolina entered with more experience. But Eala controlled the most important areas of the match. Her return game was exceptional. Her discipline under pressure looked elite. Most importantly, she stayed calm in critical moments. That mental composure stood out immediately to commentators and former champions watching courtside. Tracy Austin, a Hall of Famer and former world number 1, described Eala as sturdy mentally. That word carried enormous meaning. Because sturdy is not the word analysts use for young players living on potential. It is the word used for competitors who already understand how to survive pressure professionally. Austin also praised Eala's variation. Not simply her power. Not simply her athleticism. Variation. The ability to change pace, alter spin, manipulate angles, and disrupt rhythm. Those qualities are often what separate long-term elite players from temporary breakout stars. And suddenly, people throughout tennis started realizing something important. Alex Eala's game possessed layers. For years, many fans viewed her primarily as an aggressive left-handed player capable of producing explosive shot-making. Berlin revealed something deeper. She could construct points patiently. She could defend. She could adapt tactically. She could absorb pressure instead of collapsing beneath it. Those qualities are terrifying when combined with natural talent. Because they suggest sustainability. By the time the Berlin run ended, Eala had achieved something massive. 2 top 10 wins in 2 days. On grass. Against elite opponents. That alone changed the conversation surrounding her future. But there was another layer that mattered even more. This was not the first time she had strung together huge victories against elite players. She had already done it in Miami the previous year. Different surface. Different opponents. Different conditions. That detail mattered enormously. Because one breakthrough tournament can be dismissed. 2 breakthrough tournaments on 2 different surfaces cannot. That is how reputations become reality. Of course, Berlin also revealed where Eala still needed to improve. The semi-final against Linda Noskova exposed some of the remaining gaps in her game. Noskova's raw power created constant pressure. Her ability to flatten ground strokes through the court disrupted Eala's rhythm repeatedly. Eala fought hard. She competed bravely. But she lost in straight sets. And strangely, that defeat may have been just as important as the victories. because real progress in professional tennis is rarely linear. The best players learn not only from winning, but from understanding exactly where the ceiling currently exists. Berlin showed both the ceiling and the next step required to break through it. But even in defeat, the impact of the tournament was enormous. The rankings shifted dramatically. Alex Eala climbed toward the top 30. Her Wimbledon seeding became official. History followed immediately behind it. For the first time ever, a Filipina player entered a Grand Slam singles draw as a seeded competitor. That sentence alone changed Philippine tennis forever. Think about the magnitude of that for a moment. A country with more than 100 million people. A nation where basketball dominates sports culture. A country that had never previously produced a seeded Grand Slam singles player. And now, suddenly, Alex Eala stood inside the protected top 32. The symbolism stretched far beyond rankings. She became proof that players from the Philippines could belong on the sport's biggest stages. And as Wimbledon approached, excitement exploded across the Filipino community worldwide. London, Dubai, Toronto, Sydney, Los Angeles, Manila. Filipino fans organized schedules, streamed matches together, filled social media with support, and prepared to follow every point she played at the All England club. What made the moment even more powerful was the contrast with her early career. Years earlier, Alex Eala was simply a young girl from the Philippines dreaming about competing against the players she watched on television. Now, she was defeating them. The emotional weight of that reality became visible during interviews after Berlin. She openly admitted that playing against stars like Svitolina felt surreal because those were the same athletes she admired growing up. That honesty made fans connect with her even more deeply. Because underneath the growing fame and rankings, she still carried visible humility. Still carried gratitude. Still looked slightly stunned by how quickly her world was changing. And maybe that authenticity explains why so many people have rallied behind her rise. Fans can sense when athletes remain emotionally connected to the journey itself. Eala still plays with visible joy, visible hunger, visible emotion. That combination becomes magnetic, especially in a sport where many players become guarded and robotic under constant pressure. By the time Wimbledon finally arrived, the atmosphere surrounding Eala felt completely different from previous Grand Slams. She was no longer arriving quietly. People expected something. Commentators discussed her openly. Analysts identified her as a dangerous floater in the draw. Opponents respected her. And then came the opening round victory that made history. Straight sets. Dominant. Confident. The first Filipina woman in the Open era to win a Wimbledon main draw singles match. Another barrier shattered. Another historic milestone added to an already remarkable season. The celebration among Filipino fans was extraordinary. Court 12 transformed into something resembling a home stadium. Flags everywhere. Loud cheers after every winner. A level of emotional energy rarely seen during early-round Wimbledon matches. Even Eala admitted afterward that she was stunned by the atmosphere. She never imagined experiencing a home crowd feeling at Wimbledon. But that is what her journey had become. A national movement. And perhaps that is the most incredible part of this entire story. Alex Eala is no longer rising alone. Every victory now carries emotional weight for millions of people watching from home. That kind of support can create enormous pressure. But it can also create enormous strength. So far, Eala has handled it beautifully. Every stage of her rise has revealed greater composure, greater maturity, greater belief. The nervous teenager still searching for consistency is disappearing. In her place stands a competitor capable of surviving the intensity of the biggest tournaments in the world. And that evolution may be the most frightening development for the rest of the WTA Tour. Because Alex Eala is still only 21 years old. Most players at that age are still trying to discover their identity professionally. Eala is already building one. A left-handed shotmaker with tactical intelligence, elite movement, mental resilience, and growing confidence against top-ranked opposition. Those qualities travel well across surfaces. And the broader tennis world has clearly noticed. Aryna Sabalenka, the world number 1, had already spoken publicly about Eala long before Berlin exploded into headlines. In interviews, Sabalenka described her as a future center court player. Not someday. Not eventually. Soon. That type of praise from the reigning world #1 matters. Elite athletes recognize danger early. They study trajectories carefully. And Sabalenka clearly saw something in Eala's game that suggested permanence rather than temporary momentum. Berlin simply confirmed it publicly. Now the challenge changes completely. Because expectations have changed. Nobody will underestimate Alex Eala anymore. Future opponents will prepare differently. The pressure will increase. The media attention will intensify. Every result will receive greater scrutiny. That transition from rising talent to genuine contender is often the hardest stage of a professional career. Some players struggle once the spotlight becomes permanent. Others thrive. Right now, Eala appears to be embracing it. And perhaps that confidence comes from understanding exactly how much work it took to arrive here. People see the trophies, the rankings, the viral highlights, but they rarely see the years underneath them. The sacrifices, the lonely practices, the painful defeats, the self-doubt, the pressure of carrying expectations from an entire country before reaching full adulthood. Eala has lived through all of it already. That experience hardens athletes. It sharpens perspective. It teaches survival. Which brings us back to Berlin. Because Berlin was not simply another good tournament. It was the moment the tennis world officially updated its understanding of Alex Eala. The rankings changed. The narratives changed. The expectations changed. And perhaps most importantly, the belief changed. Not only among fans. Inside Eala herself. The confidence required to defeat elite players repeatedly cannot be faked. Once athletes experience those victories, something changes psychologically. The fear disappears. The aura surrounding famous opponents weakens. Suddenly, top players stop looking untouchable. They start looking human. Beatable. That realization changes careers. And now, standing inside the top 30, seeded at Grand Slams, carrying historic achievements already at age 21, Alex Eala enters the next phase of her journey. Not as a surprise. Not as a curiosity. But as a legitimate part of the conversation surrounding the future of women's tennis. The room she once dreamed about entering now contains her name permanently. Sabalenka. Rybakina. Pegula. Svitolina. Świątek. And now Eala. Not as a fan. Not as an outsider. As a competitor. The sport's biggest stages no longer feel impossible for her. They feel natural. And that should make the rest of the tour very uncomfortable. Because players who combine talent with belief become dangerous. Players who combine belief with experience become contenders. And players who continue improving after breakthrough moments often become champions. Nobody knows exactly where Alex Eala's ceiling ultimately exists. Maybe Berlin was the beginning of something enormous. Maybe Wimbledon becomes another breakthrough. Maybe future Grand Slam finals are waiting somewhere ahead. Or maybe tougher lessons still remain before she fully arrives among the sport's true elite. That uncertainty is part of what makes sports compelling. But one truth already feels undeniable. The story has changed. The conversation has changed. The expectations have changed. Alex Eala is no longer knocking on the door of women's tennis. She has already stepped inside. And now the rest of the sport is being forced to adjust to her presence.